All right, welcome everyone to the OSU Alumni Association's International Women's Day panel. My name is Mary Erdman. I am the Executive Director of the Student Network, and I'll be your MC for this event. To kick off this event, I wanted to reiterate why we celebrate International Women's Day. International Women's Day is a global holiday celebrated annually on March 8th as a focal point in the women's rights movement, bringing attention to issues such as gender equality, reproductive rights, and violence and abuse against women. It also celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. Therefore, in celebration of International Women's Day, these incredibly accomplished women have so generously donated their time to share some of their wisdom about the professional world at this panel discussion. With that being said, let's get started with some open group questions for our panelists, and we'll have individual questions for you guys at the end. To start off, if you all would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you come from and what roles you have held leading up to the positions that you have today.
Well, Kayse Shrum, and did you laugh? Okay. And I started out as a physician, so I'm a pediatrician by training. Grew up in Oklahoma, lived in Oklahoma. Majority of my life, I've been outside the state for short periods of time, but for the most part, lived in Oklahoma. I practiced general pediatrics in Muskogee for a period of time before I came back to the university. At the medical school as an assistant professor, and then ended up the department chair of pediatrics and served as a vice president for academic affairs before serving as the provost and dean there, and then later served as the president and dean, and served as the governor's secretary for science and innovation for a period of time, and then found my way to Oklahoma State here in Stillwater.
All right, I'm Jeanette Mendez. I'm Provost and Senior Vice President here at Oklahoma State, and I'm from California, Northern California. I lived there until I went to grad school, and I went to grad school in Indiana, and then I lived in Houston. I was an assistant professor at University of Houston, and then I've been at Oklahoma State since 2005 as an assistant professor of political science. I was a professor of political science, department head of political science. I went over to the dean's office as associate dean of research, then dean of arts and sciences, then vice provost, and I've been in the provost position.
Alumni Association. Lifelong educator. I started out in the 70s teaching SED, severely emotionally disturbed children. So my passion is social emotional health, culture, climate. Moved all the way through different school systems in Kansas and Oklahoma, principaled a long time in high poverty and affluent schools, and then finished my public ed career as superintendent actually here in Stillwater, retired 8 years ago, and then went on to travel Oklahoma for 7 years working with school boards and superintendents in a variety of roles. I was actually on this board. I was on Blaire's board. Blaire was in this job ahead of me a while back. And then when this job was open over the summer, the recruiter said, "Why aren't you applying?" And I was kind of snarky and said, "Nah, thanks, I'm living my twilight job. See the kids, grandkids every week, it's all good. No thanks." And he wouldn't take no. Said, "Talk to the family," and my husband, sitting in the back in the orange, and my grown children who are OSU grads were all in. I said, "You are kidding." They said, "Nope, you got to do it, you got to go." So here I am, best decision, and September 1. So I made it through the first semester. And I know, and everyone's still happy as far as I know, and my board is happy, right? While we're stirring stuff, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we are very happy you're here. We are very happy. I'm Blaire Atkinson. I am at the OSU Foundation. I'm a native Oklahoman as well, from Northwest Oklahoma. Landed at Oklahoma State and have a degree from the Spears School of Business, so I'm a proud Spears alumna. Had an option in human resources as part of my business management degree and spent a lot of time in human resources before coming back to Oklahoma State at the foundation in 2011. And I was in HR there for quite a while, and then did development services, and then went to the Alumni Association and was president there, and came back to the foundation 3 years ago now as the president.
Perfect. Our next question is, students at OSU are laying the groundwork for their future careers and success. Due to your extensive experience in the professional world, what is your general definition of success that you strive for and that students should look to strive for?
So I think success is really defined by the individual, because I think it's really about achieving goals, and that's your personal goals. And I think it's important for you to figure out what drives you and what makes you feel like you have achieved those goals. So for me, it's about impact. So it's never been about a title or about anything other than, if I feel like if I have accomplished something that impacts and betters the lives of others, I feel like I've been successful. That's how I measure success. But that's, individual for everybody. And what drives you and what makes you feel as though you've accomplished something is very unique. But I would challenge you to think about what that is, because for everybody, it's different. And if you're measuring your success based on someone else's, you will find that you feel, even if you succeed, you feel, empty about it. So I think it's very important to think about that before, you really jump into a career, and make sure that whatever makes that organization successful also meets and fulfills you personally.
Yeah, I would have said very similar to that. I mean, I'm just goal-oriented. Certainly never thought I'd be sitting up here, be provost of a university like many people. Wouldn't have known what a provost of a university was. But I like to be challenged, and I like to learn. And so success for me is just constantly making sure that I'm constantly challenged, that I'm learning at everything I'm doing. And I think over time, it's really become a lot more about the fulfillment as well. Just making sure success for me is that I can make a contribution in my professional life, but I'm fulfilled in my personal life as well. And so when both of those are working together and I'm feeling like I'm doing what I want in both of those avenues, then I feel like I've been successful.
Can I just say ditto, right? I mean, that you'll see a theme, because first of all, the four of us get along really well. And I think that also is the key to something we need to talk about tonight too, maybe later. But for me, and I think it goes back to just my initial career choice, which is I want to make sure at the end of the day, I always, as I'm driving back to the house here, try to reflect on a positive that happened in the day. And for me, it was, did I make a positive impact on someone else? Because as we know, just like all of you know, there are things in your day that you go, ugh. And so instead of having my brain focus on the I focus on what was positive about today, and did I have a positive impact? Have I helped at least one person in some way? And to me, that's how I feel success. Now, the whole mental game inside, that whole balance, we can talk about that later. That's a struggle, I'll just tell you. My family will tell you that. They look at my calendar and make comments. Where's the balance? I'm still struggling at this ripe old age of figuring out work-life balance. I don't know how some people do it, but that's still a battle for me to try to, tame the calendar, I'll say. So I don't even think about that part. So for me, success is my impact on other people.
I would say the same thing. It's that sort of life of significance in trying to serve others. If you make it about yourself, it's going to be hard to be fulfilled, but if you're really leaning into others and helping make an impact in the world around you, that's success. And I feel like as I heard each of these ladies say that, think about why you're at Oklahoma State as a land-grant university, and part of our mission is service. So that's something that really is in our DNA as a university, and you'll see that in Dr. Shrum's leadership here, that everything we're doing is about serving people, serving students, serving community. So that, I think, will be a fulfilling part of our culture in perpetuity.
Awesome. Our following group question is based on your unique roles within OSU. What is one of the biggest challenges universities are facing today, and what changes should our community focus on to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think, higher education in general has, several challenges. One, we really, rising costs make it challenging for people to get an education. Secondly, as you kind of look out to the future, we have potential enrollment cliff because there are fewer people graduating in the future than there are today. And you also, if you listen, people are questioning, the relevance of a higher education today. And so I think that, we can look at challenges and see them as, hurdles, or we can look at them as opportunities. And so I think we have a lot of opportunity there because I think higher education is more relevant today than it's ever been. And I think land-grant universities are the answer because we don't need to convince people that we're relevant. We need to be relevant. And that is about looking, being nimble and being willing to change and not saying we've done things this way forever and that's why we have to do it this way and it's never going to be any different. It's challenging our reality and saying what are the needs of the people we serve. And I think as Blaire was talking about that, service is a big part of a land-grant university. And so to me, that's, I said I like to make an impact, and if I feel I can, that's when I really get excited about a leadership role. And I think when I look across Oklahoma State University, I think that the world is really looking for higher education to be somewhat different, and we have an opportunity to be leaders, to be preeminent, and to set the standard. So I think that's what you should, expect in your community is that we're going to be evolving and we're going to be changing, but we want to, we really want to serve our students, we want to serve our state and our world in everything that we do.
Did you notice she took like 3? She did 3 challenges. So she did her first one, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go with. In my head, I was like, cost.
It's getting serious when she sits up, like, okay.
And then I was like, I'm going to relevance. And then she's like, and then relevance. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to take them all. But so I'll just say, since the question said from our vantage point, and so I'm going to go a little more on the relevance. So I think we have a challenge in getting students to come to college or see the value of a college degree. And to that, I'm going to say 2 things. One, you are always better off with a college degree than not with a college degree. But also, I think that once you're in college, one of the things we struggle with in some of our colleges in communicating the value of the degree is the value of the actual degree. We have a lot of parents guiding students to certain career paths or certain majors thinking that that's going to be the one that's going to make them more successful or more marketable. And I'm just going to tell you, it is the degree itself and the knowledge you're going to get in college that is going to make all the difference. So I would tell students to follow their passion, take the courses that interest them, find that type of path, because that's where you're going to find what you want to do with your life, and then you're going to be more successful to come. But if you just really think, I have to do this degree to get this job, actually what we're hearing from employers is that's not really true. What they want is they want a well-rounded student who has the ability to learn and grow, and that's what they're really looking for. So I add on to the relevance, I think it's the relevance in just having the degree and then pursuing what you're interested in.
From my perspective, from the Alumni Association, we're looking at connectivity. So when you think about just coming out of COVID and we're seeing everyone, they don't want to. You see how many are here tonight. We have several hundred people here tonight. You're not streaming it from, Starbucks or your house or anything. You're here in person. And so we're seeing more people craving this face-to-face, in-person connection. I have a funny story to tell about Dean Sheila. So I was here in the early 90s. I was a commuter student working on my doctorate. And let me just tell you, Edmund Lowe looks a little different today than it did in the early 90s. And when I met with her last fall, she said, well, Ann, when was the last time you were in our library? I said, well, I sure didn't come up here when my kids were here, so early 90s. And she said, let me give you a tour. And what impressed me was the library, under her leadership, has kept up with the changes that our students and faculty want to see. When you're on some, I can't remember which floor I was on, she took me all over, but the modular furniture where students can pull it all together to fit their groups, and they can be isolated in a room by themselves, or they can take a small group in a room, or they can be out in the open and pulling technology and the furniture together. I mean, I just stood there. She finally had to say, we got to go to another floor, because I was so amazed, and that was a way of connecting. So our thing here is figuring out how do we keep connecting with students on campus so that when you leave here, you can say, I had this experience at OSU, and makes you want to give back in time, talent, and gifts once you leave here.
Yeah, so at the foundation, we have the benefit of working with passionate individuals who really want to help transform the university through generosity. And I think sometimes they struggle with seeing the impact that they're making. So I look around here with 200 people and think every one of you has a pretty amazing story. And that's what they want to hear. They want to know that they're helping each of you individually and collectively throughout your life. And so we work really hard to try to create those connections and understand the impact of the generosity to the donors around us. But it's getting you here and keeping you here. So everything that Dr. Shrum and Provost Mendez said in terms of the relevancy of higher ed, you all are the walking, talking example of why it matters. You all are the lives that we're changing. And so those are the stories that we're trying to take back to the donors and the larger alumni community.
Thank you for your responses. Next, what was your most difficult adjustment or challenge you faced when you entered the professional world or when you moved into a new field, and what did this teach you?
Well, so I'll talk about being in residency, when you're training to be a doctor, and, the doctors who have been practicing a long time, we refer to them as attendings. So as a resident, you're still in training in your specialty area, and as you graduate, you start to feel more and more competent, but you kind of have the safety net of an attending physician, because if you don't have you have a question, you just have this person who's looking over everything that you're doing. And so you graduate one day where you have this kind of feeling of a safety net, and then the next day, you're out there practicing on your own, and people are looking at you like, doctor? And although you've done that for a long period of time, you've never done that when you're the only one there, and you have a little bit of this imposter syndrome or questioning yourself. And in that moment, I think for me, it was, okay, you have to stop and think, I have all these skills, I know what I'm doing, and I have to be confident in this moment to do what I need to do, but also be open to learn in every situation and seek help when I need it. That was a really big learning opportunity for me, because I will tell you that anybody who's in a leadership position that tells you, I 100% felt I was ready for that job, is lying to you. Because every role I've ever taken on, you don't know everything. You can't know everything. And so I think just realizing that we all struggle with imposter syndrome to some extent, and that, being who you are and being comfortable in your own skin and being confident and knowing that when you step outside of that comfort zone, that's where you grow. You grow as a leader, you grow as a person, as long as you can embrace that. But I think, for me, that's always been every transition. It's like you have to give yourself a little grace to know, I'm going to grow into this, and don't wait until you think you're ready to take on a new role.
I agree, and I think I was trying to think through various transitions and trying to figure out, but I think each one is fairly similar in that type of situation. My hardest was probably my very first leadership position is becoming department head, because I was asked by senior faculty to do that. Our department head was leaving. They needed me to step in as an interim. They didn't want to do it themselves, and it was kind of just, Jeanette will do that. And I didn't think I was really ready. So it wasn't just imposter syndrome. There were other things I wanted to do during that time. And so it was really trying to figure out, I had young kids, balancing that, taking on a leadership role. And then suddenly, that was my first time in leadership where I was leading a department of 20 faculty who had been my peers and my friends. And suddenly I was making decisions. I was writing evaluations about them. And suddenly it was really, for me, managing those friendships and those peer relationships in a different type of situation where suddenly it wasn't, I just run down the hall and chit-chat with them about something. I learned a lot about having to strike that balance and what it means to lead when those people had just been your friends, and how you maintain those friendships, but how you also need to be set those boundaries. So I think I learned a lot in that.
For me, I was reflecting, this is year 44 for me, and I've had 34 years of leadership. So I would say my hardest transition was probably the first year I became a principal. I was only 31. It was 650 students, high poverty. The majority were Black and Hispanic, taught by all white, older teachers who had been there when the building was built. And the school had gone from very affluent, where the superintendent's kids actually used to go there, to high poverty in a short amount of time. And they hadn't kept up. And so here comes this 31-year-old observing, expecting them to be kind and good to every child in their classroom, and I wasn't seeing that. And let me just say, when I would cruise the classrooms, I called it, and I was visible all the time and giving them informal feedback, I had several veteran teachers say, "I've outlived 5 principals, I'll outlive you." I'm ashamed to say, I have a much better filter now in this decade of my life. I looked at him and said, "Bring it on. I will outlast you." And I did. Let's just say 7 did not come back after my first year, because we're here for all kids. And that's why my license tag for 30 plus years before I came here, now it just says Petey, P-E-T-E-Y, that's my grandma's name, my OSU tag. If you see me, I will be following the driving rules. But for 30 years, my car tag said Kids First, KDS, FRST. That's how we made decisions in schools. But I got to tell you, there was no support from the administration building on helping with that. They would say, "Oh, Ann, you got it. You can do it." And now we know differently. We need to coach and support first-year teachers, first-year administrators, right? But every position I've had throughout my amazing career, I've learned. And even in the short time I've been here, and this woman to my right has been a huge help because she's been in this job, so she knows. And every job, I mean, I've learned now in this short amount of time I've been here. So I think that's what's cool, is just being open to learning, and that you don't walk in, you think you're ready, but as we all know, there are always surprises.
How do I top that? That's a great story. That's a great story. I think I'm going to kind of double down on what Dr. Shrum said, because I think for me, for whatever reason, you just kind of get thrown into positions sometimes that you really feel like you're not ready for, and whether that's imposter syndrome or reality, who knows? But I think part of it is that, and I don't know if females have a harder time with that. I don't know if for me I did, and I don't know if it was because of my age or if it was because I'm female. I really struggled with feeling like I was ready for whatever that role was that I just got plumped into. And I did go a lot from, in some cases, a subordinate to a boss. That was different even than peer to boss. And that was hard. It was really hard for me, but I think what the lessons I learned in that was just to be humble and open. And I mean, I think for me, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but listening to people around you and finding good mentors and finding good people that are going to contribute to it. You don't have to make decisions on your own. You don't have to be isolated and all that. There's great people that want to help solve problems, and if you let them into your orbit, they're going to help make sure that you have a well-rounded perspective when you're making decisions and that you've thought through everything, and so that was really helpful to me. But that imposter syndrome is something that has been a struggle for me for quite a while.
Thank you guys so much for sharing those stories. Now we'll have some questions that tie in a bit more to International Women's Day. So, do you think women face unique challenges in the workplace and in leadership positions? If so, what are those challenges and how can we overcome them?
Well, I definitely think we do have unique challenges. Before I jump into that, I always say, you know, we do have unique challenges as females, but I've never wanted to focus, or I don't talk a lot about those obstacles, because I think that they get a stronghold when you validate them. And so I always see them as opportunities to either prove someone wrong or to get better myself. And you know, as a female, I don't want to be discriminated against, and I don't want to be hired because I'm a female. And so I really try to focus on, you know, what is my performance and doing the best I can, being the best team member I can. But that being said, some of my individual challenges, I think everyone will have different challenges. Work-life balance is huge. I'm a mother of 6. When I went into medicine, I had, several people tell me, if you're going to go into medicine, you need to choose between having a family and being a physician. You can't have both. And my theme has always kind of been, watch me. And so I obviously managed to do that.
6 kids. Let's just really.
Yeah, overachieving here. So I think, really focusing on, work-life balance is hard. And I didn't have many females that I could look to as role models during that time. And so, I think that's a challenge because you're trying to figure out how to, especially in, my field, and in medicine and in leadership in medicine, very few females are in those roles. So it's predominantly male. And so, for a long time, I struggled to figure out, how do I manage my personal life and be a professional as well. And so that was always a challenge for me. And I felt like, we were kind of like ducks. Everybody's swimming along, and I'm like treading water underneath there, looking like everything's going well. So I think that's a challenge. I also think that we as females sometimes internally have challenges. It's kind of going to that work-life balance thing about, being torn between your responsibilities, being at work and being 100%. I never felt like I wanted anything to fall off or be compromised. So, when I was president with my kids, I was 100% there, but I always felt like there was something I should be doing for work. And when I was at work, I always felt like there was something I should be doing for my kids. And the one thing that I think always happened to me is the only thing that would ever fall off is taking care of myself. So that's always a challenge. And again, for me, just going into leadership roles and seeing predominantly male leaders, and I think that part of that is the challenge is that people see certain attributes as the attributes of a leader. And if you're the first female and you don't have, attributes that you might see commonly in male leaders, whether that's your voice or, it's amazing some of the things that people, pick up on. Those are all just challenges. And so I think over time, what I would say is be who you are, be comfortable with who you are. Don't try to be anything different than that, because if you take on a leadership role, that is the identity of a leader. Whatever it is that you did to get there, that's what you need to continue doing. Because when we're true to ourselves, that's when we're able to lead people. People want to be connected to somebody who's authentic, and I think that's a real struggle that we have for females in leadership or anybody in leadership. So
I would agree, and I would think that in higher ed, we really do have a lot of male leaders, and so just finding female leaders in higher ed has been something that I haven't have. I've told President Shrum this. She's the first female I've ever reported to, and I don't think she's reported to a female before. And so that's shocking to me at this point in my career that I just hadn't had a female leader that I was looking towards. But I think I try not to think about being female as much in the leadership position because I think women are such great leaders in and of themselves. We are compassionate. We are multitaskers. You can throw a ton at us and we're going to get stuff done. And so I lean into those types of things, and I don't try to think about what a man might do in that same position. That said, I think the one thing I've come to talk myself out of is a lack of confidence at times. I really have to make sure that when I'm making a decision, I've done my due diligence, that I've studied everything from as many angles as possible, and then own that decision and be confident in it. Because that's the one thing I noticed my male colleagues were doing is they weren't second-guessing what they were doing. They weren't stewing over it. They weren't going home worried about it. They weren't discussing it. When the decision was done, the decision was done. And that's something that I really just think I learned about. And then really that work-life balance. I think that for women is always going to be one of the more difficult especially if you're surrounded by a lot of male leaders who don't really maybe have that frame of reference. I remember even just talking to a series of department heads in a college when I was a department head, and they talked about how, and I said, "What? That's great, you guys all go to breakfast together once a week. What a great community." And he says, "Yeah, we meet every Wednesday at 7:30. And I looked at him and I said, "None of you take kids to school?" And he goes, "Oh, no, none of us do." And I thought, oh, okay, well, I can't meet you at 7:30 because I'm doing other things at that point in time. And so it's just little things that I don't think anything about. It's just what I do in my day-to-day, and then realize that some of the male leaders don't have that same perspective that we're having. So I do try to keep that in check. But again, having the confidence and then striking that balance, you were saying earlier, it is not easy to do. My kids would probably tell you. I do it well sometimes, and I don't do it well other times. But I try to prioritize it the best I can and make sure that I'm leaning into both and being present in the moment.
The challenge for me, just as a public ed leader, I remember it was the late 80s, and I was applying to be a principal in the district that I had taught in Oklahoma. And when I interviewed, then the superintendent was so sweet, and he said, "But Ann, I'm not going to hire you now. I need more men." And I went, "Yes, sir." And I went home, got out the directory, and counted. And it was 2-to-1 men over women. So I didn't understand what more meant. When I came here, was applying for superintendent jobs, that was in 2007. I wish I had saved this, because when I retire, I'm writing a book, Lessons Learned, because I think no matter good or bad, you learn, right? And I, in all these years, might have a few stories, and some might be true, to quote a friend of mine. But in 2007, when I was applying, I actually had a 6A school district board president email me back and say, "Thank you for applying, but in our district, we do not hire female superintendents." I wish I'd saved that email, and to this day, they do not. They still have men. So I was very fortunate that Stillwater said yes to a woman. I was there first. It might have been a little earth-shattering. If you lived here in 2008, you felt the earthquake. But my funny story about that, and just, I'll tell you my belief system here in a sec, but I would just say it was Ann and the boys. No disrespect to our men that are here tonight. You're awesome. But you have to understand, at that time in 2008, there were 2 female superintendents. One was Dr. Kathy Burden in Union, sweet, amazing leader, and myself. So Kathy would come to some meetings, but the ones that I remember being at and I didn't see Kathy, I just said, "It's Ann and the boys." And I would work the room like I do, learn that from my dad. And so I walk up to a group of 6 superintendents, and I knew one, and I said, "Hi, Ann, Caine store," and we were talking about a hot topic. I won't tell you what it is. It's not the place for tonight. And the gentleman next to me, and of course I love shoes, and I'll just say I was taller than him. He reaches up and pats me on the head. Now this was not long before I retired, and I retired in 15. So it was probably 14, 13, who cares? And he said, "Little girl," now y'all, by then I was in my 60s. "Little girl," and I'm tall, "don't worry your pretty face about that." I am not kidding. That one's going in the book. And that one is true. And so, I could feel my neck getting red, And the soup that knew me said, "Dr. Caine, it might be good if you just move to another group." And I said, "I think so. Gentlemen, it was so nice visiting with you. Make it a great day." Because I truly believe you. That's why I say make it an awesome day. We can control that message. But when I walked off of there, I thought, wow. And I had great self-control because I was not thinking nice things up here, right? But as far as being a female leader, I just say, and I said this at Stillwater Medical's event last Wednesday, be kind. When we keep thinking about, especially coming out of COVID, and especially for female leaders, because you don't want to come across as being too, I don't know the word for it. But so I just say be kind, right? And truly mean it. Be kind. And then listen more than you talk. So my dad, the Air Force pilot, my first mentor, said, "Annie, there's a reason God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth." I'm still working on that. But I will say, you learn so much when you're just quiet and you listen to the people around you as a leader and you model for them that a great leader listens, you learn so much. And then the third thing, I really try to be a servant leader, and that's what we're really going for here at the association. Everyone we bring in to work in our building, we want them to serve OSU and the greater good. It's not about us. It's not about anyone else. It's about serving OSU and serving our alumni. I'm very passionate about that. So you're not going to see, yes, I'm loud, yes, I'm out there, but it's not an ego thing. It's about truly how can we make OSU better. And so I think as a female leader, if I can model that for other people, for other women, you don't have to be out there, right, and being braggy and all that. You won't hear that from me. Instead, it's how can I serve you? How can I help you? What do you need from us? I think as women leaders, if we do that, then we're showing it's okay to have a woman in charge, right? It's okay. I'm still going to have a voice. Just my 2 cents.
Well, it's taken some time, I think, for that to be okay. I think I heard everyone say here just that unapologetic authenticity. And I think because there have not been as many women in the workforce for as long, it's taken a little time for us to all say, you know what, I am me, and that's okay, and I'm going to be me. So whether that means that my kindness is taken for a lack of toughness, fine. I'm tough, I know it, but my approach may be different, and that's okay. And that has been something that I feel like I have grown into for sure the last 8 years. When I started at the Alumni Association, I think that I had enough mentors around me that just kept shoving me in the, be okay with this, just be who you are, and that's good enough, and you're doing a great job. And you just need people to affirm that you can be who you are and not try to live in the shadow of someone else or to adopt someone else's leadership style or philosophy. I think to say one of the things that, I don't know if guys do that, but the mom guilt thing is a real deal. And that's partly because there are younger people in the workforce now that have kids and you have dual working families, but there aren't a lot of people in these roles that have dual working families or that have had to struggle with the mom guilt maybe before. And so I have looked to these ladies to understand how to do that. When I first started at the Alumni Association, President Shrum was so kind to meet me here upstairs, here in this building, and spend probably 2 hours with me. And I ask her a million questions, like, how do you do this? What do you do? I mean, just needing advice from someone who had been leading a medical school on our campus, I think starting at the age of 40. Were you
38.
38, so right around 40. And I just needed to hear her. I needed to hear, how did you do it? How did you approach it? How did you balance 6 kids? Give me some advice and wisdom. And she was so affirming in that moment of, you're going to feel this. You're going to feel a little conflicted no matter where you're at, like you need to be somewhere else. I can remember you saying that. But you also reminded me that part of our job as parents is to create, self-sufficient and responsible kids, and that we can do that and be great in our roles as well, and that part of our job is the greater good. It's serving people around us and serving communities and making a big impact, and our kids will see that. And I just needed to hear that. I needed to hear that from somebody who had been there and been in that position and has 6 great kids that are very successful. And so I'd say use people around you and find mentors and people who are going to help guide you in those personal situations where you're just struggling internally with how to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's where I always tell people, be authentic, and, the things that you're most insecure about, if you talk about, first of all, if you talk about it, it takes the power away from other people to talk about it. However, if you embrace it. And so, being able to just say, boy, I'm struggling with this. There are people who've walked that path that are really, and a lot of times they're happy that you talk about it. When I first took my role as the dean, the one thing I did not like about it was public speaking. And I from the time I was, in college, I'm telling you all, I researched what class would probably be the smallest speech class. I found one on like Tuesday night, and you all laugh because I was like, I bet this one has old people in it. And me, about my age, that would have been old. And I was like, and they surely, I don't want to talk in front of anybody I don't know, and these people probably, I'll never see them again. And so, I would go to great lengths not to have to talk in front of people. And so I remember one of the very first times I had to speak, and I would panic. Like, I couldn't even see people's faces. It was like, just very scary to me. And I knew I didn't do a great job, and somebody said something to me about it. And it really, for a minute, it kind of really hurt me. And I thought, why is this really bothering me? And I thought, well, probably because it's true. If I know it, everybody else out there knows it. So I just started telling, I've just embraced it. Like, talk about it, ask people, seek out help. And pretty soon, you learn these little things, whatever that is that you feel insecure about. If you just embrace that and say, I have to get outside my comfort zone. Part of that was I knew when I took over the dean's job, I was going to be standing in front of people all the time. Eventually, you just get used to it because, you might have a bad day, but you have a chance to redeem yourself the next one. So, it's not going to kill you. So that's the great thing about it. But I think that's what, you have to do in that when I say just be yourself and embrace whatever that is you're insecure about, and you'll find you'll grow into that. And other people, they grow from it when you're real.
It's so much of our lives are about relationships and about trust. And when you can be vulnerable and just say, I'm not good at this or I'm struggling with this, it scales trust really quickly, right? And you realize they're fighting for your highest possible good, and they want to be honest with you and they want to help you as well. So I do think there's something to that, just being genuine with what your weaknesses are.
Thank you guys for sharing those impactful stories about your challenges. Our next question, on a lighter note, is many student leaders search for role models and mentors. Have you drawn professional inspiration from other women? Tell us about someone who has inspired you or mentored you in some way.
Yeah, so when I was saying earlier, I really had no, females to kind of be my role model, even as in my training, in my medical school. We had 2 females that were on faculty. And so, when I had an opportunity to come back to the university and join faculty, I was really excited about that. But I wasn't very cognizant of that fact at all. But as I kind of progressed through my career, and, I had mentors that helped me, and, I would learn from watching people. But I had this amazing opportunity, because sometimes you don't know that you've had somebody mentoring you or you're standing on somebody's shoulders, because you never have the experience of knowing who came before you. And so we at the medical school created a partnership with the Cherokee Nation. So we had the first tribally affiliated medical school in the United States with the Cherokee Nation. And as a part of that, when we started that relationship, someone said, you need to go talk to Isabel Baker. She used to be a regent at OSU, and her son is Chief Baker, Cherokee Nation. And they said, I'll set up a breakfast with you. So Isabel Baker, Dr. Baker, was, in her 80s when I met her. And you were saying you kind of follow the speed limit and all that. Well, I might or might not. And so I had a Cadillac that had a V8. So I pull up, and there's this, and mine was black. There's this white one there, and it's the same car. And I come in, there's this little lady, short, and I'm kind of looking around, and she recognizes me, and I go over there, and we start talking, and she tells me, oh, yeah, that's my car. She's like, I got to get where I'm going. I need a fast car. So I'm thinking, we're going to hit it off really well here. And she's like, and listen, we don't need to play around with all the conversation. You just need to tell me what it is you need, and I'm going to help you out. And so that was awesome. But what I learned was, as I sat there and talked to her, she said, when I was on the Regents, she had all these questions for me about the medical school. And she was like, when I was on the Regents, there were there weren't very many females in the medical school. And she said, every year I would ask them, how many women are in your medical school class? And she said that number kept going up and going up. We never hit 50%. But she said after they got there, they were just so proud of themselves. And she said, okay, well, that's great. How many female physicians do you have on faculty? And they were like, oh, 2, you know. And she was like, well, how do you expect them to know how they're going to, you know, practice in their career, how they're going to manage life, if you don't have anybody that can mentor them or they can go to and can actually understand what they're going through? And so the really neat story about that is, so she really pushed hard as a regent for them to hire more female faculty. I was one of the first female faculty members that they hired because Dr. Baker was pushing for it. And it was just one of those moments, and honestly, we really got to be very, very close, and she has since passed away, and it was, you know, her son, Chief Baker, and I got to be very close. He spoke several times, you know, when in my inauguration receptions, but it was such a moment because I really did have somebody who was helping me. I just didn't know it. And I think that's our obligation, you know, in any role, is to open doors for people. And all the challenges that I have, I hope none of you have. I mean, I hope no one ever pats you. If they pat you on the head, I'm going to come find them. Yeah. I'm like, wow. But I hope you never have to do that. But she really inspired me, and she would tell me stories, you know, just about herself. She was saying that she was in like 70s, and she had 3 boys. And they were sitting at breakfast, and she said, my boys and my husband, they were talking, and they started talking about tattoos. And she said, then they started talking about how women shouldn't have tattoos because, you know, women just shouldn't have tattoos. And she said, I was just listening to that, and I was over there just doing my dishes, and I was mad. She said, so I just walked over and I said, boys, you know, you got your food, I'll be back later. And she was like, okay. She went and got a tattoo of a butterfly on her chest at the age of 70-something. And so the next morning they would come over for breakfast, and she was like, I was listening to the conversation yesterday, and I understand you boys don't think women should have tattoos. And they started talking about it, and she said, well, just so you know, your mother has one. And she showed them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be her when I grow up. And so, you know, went to her funeral, and I told her boys, I said, listen, I want you to know I truly want to be your mother when I grow up, because she was just so fierce about things, but not in just a quiet way of going about doing what she did with full force.
Wow, that was good. That's hard to follow. Because I was thinking, you know, I'd already said I didn't have a lot of females in my profession. I did have a grad school professor and an undergrad professor that really kind of shaped what I was interested in, kind of showed me a career path. But really, when I think back, I always think of my mom. So my mom raised my sister and I as single mom, worked 2 jobs, didn't have a college degree. So I'm a first-generation college student. And so I always look to her as my mentor. And I know she would say, if she were here right now, sitting here, she's in California, she would say, but I don't have a degree, or you've done so much more than me, or I didn't really have a career, which isn't true at all, because she had a passion, she had a job that she loved, she maybe didn't like the second job, but what she taught me in what I could do and what obstacles there were and how I could face the obstacles. I mean, it was just and the life lessons I got from her, and watching her succeed, even knowing that she would say that she wasn't successful or that she didn't have really reach any type of ambitious career or anything like that. But just seeing what she did and raising 2 daughters who are educated, college degrees and master's degrees and my doctorate. I mean, just seeing her determination. I mean, to this day, I mean, I tell her all the time, and I hope that she would internalize that on some, but I don't think she would. But it always comes back to that for me. Whenever I'm just thinking, how would I approach this? what do I have to think about? I really think about the struggles my mom went, and even as I'm trying to juggle all the things I'm juggling, I never think it's anything like what she must have been struggling with, trying to figure out if she was going to be able to afford food for us, or if we had a friend over, she wouldn't eat so that that person could eat. I will never have those types of challenges, and so I always think, how would she approach it? And she always approached it with a smile and with love and with kindness, and so really, to me, that's the biggest mentor I've ever had.
Yeah, these are great stories. Well, you know, my first mentor was my dad, and that was very cool. I was sorry that he wasn't alive when I was here as a superintendent, because I could have used his sage advice when, you know, things were a little out of whack. I'll word it that way. But truly, I did not have a female mentor. They weren't there. So my two mentors, and they're mentoring me even now while I'm up here, are principals that I worked with, male principals who were very encouraging to me, supportive of me through all of my career as a leader, and then they went on to both become superintendents, and then I became a superintendent, and they continued mentoring me. And even now in this role, they're supportive of me, and do you need anything? You know, how's it going? And I just keep saying, I'm living the orange dream. Life is great. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's sad from one perspective that I can't sit up here and identify a female. On the other hand, so I like to flip things and say, what's the positive? The positive is I go to the mat for female leaders, for future female leaders. That's something I'm very passionate about. I still have a lot of young female superintendents who I've mentored, helped them get their first job as a superintendent, that still reach out to me now and talk about, I'm having a situation with this board member, or I'm having this situation with trying to pass a bond, or how did you do this? It warms my heart, because it's like, okay, I'm still able to give back. I'm not that far removed from that profession that they still think I have something to help them with. But I think just continuing to support female leaders so they can get going, that's still really passionate to me. So I flipped the conversation to say I didn't have them, but I was very blessed to have a very supportive dad and two male leaders who were very supportive and encouraging even to this day.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know that I have had a lot of female mentors in a formal way. I think I hadn't really thought about those women before until you said that. And gosh, that's the truth. You know, at the foundation, the first interim female president was Melinda Berry Fisher, and that was not common, and she really was pioneering. And we had board members like Jennifer Grigsby who were really pushing, we need more female representation on this board. And then that just evolved over time to really having just a more diverse makeup. I think when I heard that question, I really kind of reflected on two things. One, professionally, when the Alumni Association job came open, go back to that imposter thing. They were encouraging, you know, you could do this job. And I thought, I don't think I can do this. I don't know. What do they do at the Alumni Association? I'm not sure. And so I do know, and it is a great organization, but I just wasn't sure. And I had a female colleague, because part of why I wasn't sure is there were a couple of colleagues who were a little more discouraging. That I had 3 kids, and I still have 3 kids, but they said, this isn't the right time. You've got 3 kids, you need to focus on your family, and you don't need to step into this role. And so one of my colleagues said, hey, listen, if this was anyone else, they wouldn't be saying that. And if you want this job, you can do it 100%. Don't back down. If you want it, do it. And I just needed that. I needed that encouragement. And so I did. And after talking with my family, of course, and they were really supportive of that, which takes me, so just having that kind of person in my orbit was great. And then that second piece is I didn't really have a great family. My family at home and then my extended family, Some of the hardest working women you will ever meet live in Northwest Oklahoma, and they're related to me. So from my great-grandma to my grandparents on both sides, I mean, these women are real pioneering, hardworking, just head down and hustle. And so I learned a lot of that head down and hustle approach from them, whether it was I mean, they were really the ones running everything, whether or not they thought it was someone else in our family. I mean, they were really the patriarchs in moving mountains in our town and getting things done. And so I always had them as a role model to kind of emulate, that I wanted to be able to make a difference in the same kind of way, but different. They were very encouraging and very encouraging of my kind of untamed spirit, I guess, which was great. You know, you can have different people around you, and they really kept pushing that I could do something better and bigger, and so that was a big influence for me.
All right, and for the last of our group questions, what is the best piece of advice for young women or young professionals wanting to pursue a career in leadership?
I have lots of advice. You know, I think I would say make sure, you know, again, kind of going back to understand, you know, what drives you to leadership, why that's fulfilling for you, because there are a lot of lonely days as a leader, and, you know, times where you have to make a decision and you're there by yourself, and you need to remember, you know, go back to that moment. Why is leadership fulfilling to me? Second thing I would say is know your own values. Be very thoughtful about that, because you need to choose organizations that line up with your values. Makes life a lot easier. And if you can be passionate about their mission, that's something that I would say just, you know, you should always take the opportunity when it happens. I always say that. If there's an opportunity, take it. But I say that with the caveat of if it aligns with your values, and, you know, if it is something that you're passionate about, then take it. Because I think what people tend to do is miss the opportunities. People ask me all the time, well, how were you a dean at 38 years old? That was because I took an opportunity when it was kind of the interim role. Like you said, you were asked to be in an interim role. I just hadn't been at the university long enough to know in an interim role they didn't want you to do a bunch of changing and fixing, and I was out there changing and fixing, and I was like, this is my opportunity. It worked out for me because I took that opportunity, and it ended up, you know, leading me into leadership roles early on. And, you know, I think that's something that's key, is don't wait and pass up an opportunity. Like you said, if you want to do it, do it. Because when you set yourself out, you may not have that opportunity again. The other thing I would say is, you know, when you're looking in a career, someone told me, and I thought this was great. I'm like, I'm using this, so it's not my own. But he said, you know, when you're going into a job, or you graduate from college and you say you want to be a leader, you don't just jump into leadership. It's about developing the skills. But I think you leave college thinking, okay, it's so stressful because you're not sure what your career is going to be, and you feel the pressure to make a decision. And he said, A, get a job, B, get a better job after that, and C, go into your career. And I think if you listen to everybody up here, you know, I started out as a pediatrician, and I have, you know, evolved and changed, and really, you know, leadership was that pathway for me. But if I hadn't had all those experiences beforehand that developed me as a leader, you know, I think I would have missed out. So I say it's a journey. Leadership is a journey, and look at it that way, and develop those skills along the way.
I really like that because in higher ed, we often say that the reluctant leaders are the ones that really do a good job. It's the ones that weren't thinking that that's what they were interested in. And you can tell in higher ed, those that are in it for the money and those that are in it because they have a skill set and a passion and they really want to help and make impact. So I loved when you said, find out what it is about leadership and why you want to be a leader. And then my other advice is find the opportunities to engage in small leadership opportunities, and just as you said, you've got to take the opportunity, but you don't have to take every single opportunity. And so oftentimes what we find is very early in our careers, we say yes to everything. Females tend to be asked, you do a good job, you're asked to do more, and you just keep saying yes. And you really do need to figure out with each opportunity, what is it going to get you? How are you going to grow? And is it the right opportunity to say yes? Because just doing more for the sake of doing more isn't going to get you where you need to be, because you're going to have to make some, you're going to have to prioritize at some point. So I think it's just kind of figuring out both why you want to do these things and what opportunities are the ones to say yes to give you the skill set and to start to develop that. But you don't have to say yes to everything, especially if you look around your colleagues and they're saying no to everything. It's usually a sign.
That was good. You know, I was going to be a teacher my entire career. If you had told me in the 70s, in the 80s, 90s as a principal, I'd be sitting up here today, I would have died laughing. But it was actually my experience with a bad principal who wouldn't come help me with my emotionally disturbed children. Didn't answer when I hit the white button. So just so you know, those children came straight out of Topeka State Hospital into my self-contained classroom. So they're truly very bright but very ill, and I needed some help. And they said, all you got to do is hit the white button. And so then my paraprofessional watched the class. I go down the office. He's in a black suit, white shirt, black skinny tie, white socks, black shoes, feet on the desk, reading the paper. I looked at him right then. I thought, I can do that job. I never planned on being a superintendent. Had a bad experience, and I thought, I can do that job. I didn't plan on this job, but the recruiter said, you can do that job. So I would say be open. Be open-minded to anything, because number one, it doesn't have to be in your major, right? I didn't graduate with a degree in alumni relations. Be open, but don't say yes to everything. Don't jump on the first thing because you're hungry for that title, that role. You have to make sure it's a great fit, because I'm telling you, leadership is the most amazing thing. I've dedicated my life to it. But it's hard, and it has to be the right fit. And I love that President Shrum said, be true to yourself. So if it doesn't feel like the right fit, how are you going to be the best leader you can be? Because you're not being true to you. And people will see that. They're going to see, it'll be back to the imposter thing, right? They're going to see right through you, and you're going to be miserable. It's not going to be good for you. And then what happens to you after that? So I would say, just like we check out people when we're doing interviews, you need to be just as thorough, probably more so, to make sure this is the right for you, and is it the right time? Are you ready? Well, you know what? You're never going to be ready. You're not going to learn everything. It's OTJ, right? On the job. You're going to learn it on the job. But it is, if you have like what you were saying with the support, right? With the encouragement, then you try. But make sure it's the right fit and that you feel, you can tell in an interview, is this the right fit? So I would just say be open to the possibilities.
Yeah, you know, I think for me, what I see when we hire new people often is, especially for those of us who have like a business management degree, we took classes in leadership, we were in HR management, and we knew that something about leadership was really important to us and in our DNA. What often you'll see people who want to come into a management or leadership role, because that's where they see that you can be a leader, is if you have positional influence over people. And I would say my experience, and I know that's the experience of these folks here too, you can be a leader beside people. You don't have to be in a in a official position of leadership. So jump in and be a leader. You can do that from any position in the organization, especially if you've got a bad boss, especially if you're going through change in the organization. You'll see that there are opportunities for someone to step up, take control, and really lead the team, help them solve problems and get through change. So that would be what I would say is jump in and be willing to accept those challenges as they come. I think all of us have had some interim role at some point, and that was also the kind of, there's something happening, there's change, and they need someone to fill in the middle. And that has been a place where you do get to seize those opportunities and solve problems and create synergy around the team. So I'd say the same, lean into those when they come to you.
All right, and to wrap up our panel session tonight, I'll just ask each of you an individual question. So, President Shrum, could you talk about what drove you to transition from a career as a physician into a different role of service as a leader?
Yeah, that seems like an odd transition, doesn't it? Pediatrician, president, I don't know. Well, so when I was in undergrad trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I really wanted something that was going to be challenging intellectually, but also, or I could make a difference, and that I would be doing something every day that was different. And so that kind of really led me into medicine because I loved science, and honestly, I never thought I would do anything other than practice medicine. Best choice of my life. So if you're thinking about it, say yes, go to medical school. But it, as I was in practice, I missed being able to teach, because when I was in residency, I got to teach students and I got to engage in, research, different things. And so that's what drew me back to the medical school. And really, I had that opportunity as an interim, and I thought, things in that department were really messed up. And I just thought, okay, well, while they're looking for a new person, I'll just fix all the problems. They'll be really appreciative when they get here. And, that's not really what they want you to do, but I didn't know that. I was young. And I did. I just took the opportunity to do that. And I enjoyed that leadership role because I could see where I could make a difference, and I did. And so just, having that experience, I later was the department chair, and served in that capacity for a while. And I was happy there. Again, I wasn't necessarily looking for something else to do. But when, a role would open up and people would encourage me, I'd keep my mind open to it. And that really transitioned into, I love leadership. And when I became the dean, that was really a moment for me where I had to make a decision about giving up patient care and going into leadership. And that was really, really hard for me because, that's just what I loved at my core. But I realized that as the dean, I had an opportunity not to just impact 35, or 2,500 patients that I would care for and their families, but as the dean of the medical school, and we were graduating, 165 students every year, I had the opportunity to pour into them in a way that they would go out and impact their practices. And so it was like I realized that leadership was this ripple effect of impacting lives. And so I got to do some amazing things as the dean of the medical school. We're starting a VA hospital downtown Tulsa, a new mental health hospital, the Cherokee Nation campus, programs like Blue Coat to White Coat. All of those things, were things that I would have never had the opportunity to impact that many lives for generations serving in my practice, but I could through leadership. And so, that really was what excited me about leadership. And, the governors reached out and asked me to serve as the Secretary for Science and Innovation, which was totally outside of, really the medical field. He really liked the higher education experience that I had. And again, that gave me the opportunity to experience something different where I was out with industry, in aerospace and all these other things, which in some ways was humbling because, you know, being in medicine, we have all these acronyms. We know what they are. I don't even notice them. And then you go into somebody else's industry and they have that, and you're like, wow, I don't even know what you're talking about, but we'll figure it out. And so that really is how I ended up transitioning into leadership, was just realizing, you know, and I loved being at the medical school, and that was really, really hard for me to make a decision to leave the medical school, because I used to say, if you want to get me angry, say something bad about my kids or say something bad about that medical school. It's like mama bear on all that stuff. So I really had like a personal connection, because the medical school, OSU's medical school, is what really I feel like gave me the opportunities in life to do more and to help other people. And so it was really personal to me. But when the presidency job came open, I really, again, it was just like, this is more of an opportunity to have a broader impact and to help more people achieve their goals, to have an impact in individual lives. But then this university has so many ways to be impactful. And if we harness that, we can really make a difference in this world. And that's what really excited me. So that's how you get, you know, hometown pediatrician to university president.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Provost Mendez, you mentioned that you're a first-generation college student and that you've gained professional experience at many colleges, which includes Santa Clara University, Indiana University, the University of Houston, and now Oklahoma State University. Could you tell us how being a first-generation college student and your involvement in diverse universities across the country has impacted your career and leadership style?
Yeah, I mean, if I weren't a first-generation college student, I don't think I would have stayed in the college environment. I mean, it was something, and I think you will look at Oklahoma State, and there are so many of us that are first-generation and leaders here at OSU, and there is something about the experience of being a first-generation college student and going to college and finding an interest that then leads you to pursuing that and coming back to the university. I mean, and I think it's just because of that experience itself. It's also because, as a first-generation college student, I didn't know what careers were even, how you could even conceptualize that. I knew you could be a doctor, a lawyer, a secretary, and a teacher, and that was it. I just didn't really even understand what majors were, how they connected. I mean, just nothing. I remember up until senior year, I was still talking to my mom, trying to figure out what will I do after college. I had an awesome major that I got to take a lot of different courses and put together this combined science major, really because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And the thought of interviewing for a job freaked me out. I didn't like public speaking. I didn't like being asked any questions. I just really didn't want to talk to anyone. And I had a great mentor who said, you should go to grad school. And I was like, well, that's going to delay the decision on getting a job for a little while, so sounds good. So I thought I'll just get my master's, like 2 years. And then I got this offer to go to Indiana for 5 years, fully funded, and I thought, even better. I'm just kicking the can just a little further down the road. But then that advisor, I went to my advisor and I said, I think I'm just gonna go do this PhD program. Don't really know what I'm getting into. And he said, I think you love college. You picked a major that you could take a ton of different courses. You love to learn. You're gonna love being in college. Stay in, and I think you're gonna find your way to a university in a teaching position or something like that. And he was right. There's just something about the college environment that I love. I love looking out in the audience and thinking that I'm 18 to 22, regardless of what age I am, because that's what I see all day long. It's like you never age when you're at college. It's wonderful. So I love working with students, and every experience has been very similar across a very diverse group of population. So Santa Clara was where I got my undergrad. That was just so overwhelming, just doing that. But Indiana had a very similar feel to Oklahoma State. University of Houston was very unique. It was more of a commuter school at the time. It had an older population, so the average age was 29. But I will say Oklahoma State, bar none, compared to any other university, is more of a family than a job, than a school, than anything I've ever been at. So I've brought in a lot of diverse perspectives, but there is something about this community that is so special and has made everything I'm interested in just amplified. So everything I'm passionate about, I get to live out in working with all the students every single day. So there's no other place, even going from various institutions, I can't find another place that feels like this and makes what I'm passionate about kind of a reality. And I get to every day think about all the things that influenced me as a first-generation college student and work with our same students thinking about the same things and who are passionate about the same things. So I don't know if that answered it, but just this is such a special place, and I hope everyone, I know you feel it, but when you go off and go somewhere else, there's a reason you start to gravitate back and come back here, because there is a pool of this town.
I promise you, other universities do not have a provost that is that passionate, so I'm just glad for you, Dr. Mendez.
President Caine, as you mentioned before, you have an extensive experience in the Oklahoma school systems. So kind of talk about what convinced you to take on this role, which is very different working here at the Alumni Association, and how has your experience in the Oklahoma school systems impacted your perspective and your goals in this role?
Okay, for me, that's an easy question. Thank you, Mary. They asked me that during my interview, one of the 4 rounds. And actually, there was some pushback from a board member who said, I'm not really sure, and I had served on the board, and this was meant in a nice way, but you really haven't done anything to prepare yourself for being president of the Alumni Association. You're a career educator. So what have you done, and how are you ready? And I laughed. I said, au contraire. I said, I'm a proud Air Force brat. I watched my dad. I learned from my dad. It was all about relationships. From the time I was born. He taught me, and my mom was so supportive too, but you got to understand, I'm a tall Swede, big, just like Daddy. We thought alike, we acted alike, we work hard, play hard, and I was a daddy's girl, so I was the outdoor person. And he just was very supportive of me and anything I wanted to do. But anyway, so I had relationships watching him through all that. And then, of course, education. Good grief. Education is all about relationships, right? You cannot be successful in the classroom, in the school, in higher ed, if you don't have the relationship. I think back to my doctorate. I had an amazing advisor. There are some fun stories there getting me to the end, because I'll just tell you all, when I came here, I didn't have a computer. And the internet came into existence at Edmond Lowe the spring I defended my dissertation. I know. So what did you do? That's another night. I could talk all night about that. But it's relationships. And I said, so my whole career in education has been relationships. Every position I've held, it's relationships. I can't be successful if I don't have successful relationships. And I know the Alumni Association, that's us. We're the engagement relationship people, right? So to me, this is a logical transition, and it really has been. I followed up with that board member last fall after I'd been here for the first quarter, and I said, I just want you to know this really feels like I'm meant to be here right now, and everything I've done truly has prepared me to be here, because I'm just doing relationships just with a different audience. And so I think I'm meant to be here, and I was ready just because of that curvy path I took.
All right, and last but not least, President Atkinson, you have held so many leadership positions at Oklahoma State University for many years. What has it been like serving OSU for so many years? How has our university changed, and what do you see for our future?
That's a
good question.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. Well, these guys have also served a lot for the same amount of time at the university, so I will say we kind of are, stand on the shoulders of those before us. I know we would say that, and like I said, both of these two for sure have been here, I think, longer than me. I started here in 2011, and I think you all were before that, right? Were you? 2002. in 2005. So the university has certainly evolved over time. And what I'm most excited about as we look forward, it is the leadership here, but it's also this really moving into our land grant mission and owning what that means for us. So you're sitting here looking at 4 women who I think I've heard in some way, shape, or form say, who would have thought from Coweta, who would have thought from small town that here I am? And to me, that's what a land grant is, right? It's the place that each of you at some point are going to be some point in your career going, who would have thought that I would have been here? But that journey started here, right? And it started with relationships. It started with relationships of your faculty and your professors and your colleagues and your classmates. You just don't know how those relationships are going to impact and influence your life long term, and that's exciting to me. So when you have a bold vision and leaders who really understand what we're about, and they're going to just jump in with both feet and say, we're all about that. We're all about land grant. We're all about students. We're all about ideal graduates and making sure that our students are well prepared for the future. And we're asking people what that looks like. We're asking your potential employers, what does that look like? What do you need in graduates? That helps us all, right? I mean, there's just a real energy and excitement ahead of us, and I think it starts with great people sitting on this stage and many more across the university who are all moving in the same direction and are committed to making an impact in the lives of students. And I hear Dr. Shrum say, making good communities great, and I love that. It gets me excited. You hear a lot of just enthusiasm from everyone. I'll have to tell a story on President Shrum just for a second, because we're talking a lot about the next comprehensive campaign and what does that look like, and how do we help? How does the collective friends of the university help us execute the strategy? And she's, how many dollars can you raise and all that? And she says, look, it doesn't matter if we do not execute the strategy and we raise $1 billion or $2 billion, it won't matter. We have to make an impact. We have to make an impact in communities. We have to make an impact with the students. And that was compelling to me. That was exciting to me, to work around a leader who cares most about serving communities, most about serving the people in this room and the students at Oklahoma State, because we're going to be successful.
All right, and with that, we've come to an end of our International Women's Day panel. Thank you guys again so much for giving your time to share those amazing stories and your advice. So let's give them all a round of applause for a job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and go Pokes.